penalty. There's Lee! 7-0 to Newcastle.
Spurs fans hadn't been able to sing Glory Glory Tottenham Hotspur with a straight face for years now. The Premier League was here, Spurs were just simply furniture that would be wheeled out for the limelight of a trophy or a good result here and there. So in 2004, they tried to change all of that. This is Spurs, the Continental Model. Tottenham Hotspur were arguably the most important needle mover in taking English football into the Premier League age. That's because Alan Sugar, clearly in support of Sky's broadcast vision or in their pocket depending on your viewpoint, informed them of ITV's financial limitations and told Sky to blow them out of the water. They did, money streamed in, and did Spurs profit? In a sporting sense, no. Ozzy Ardiles came back as manager. He wowed Spurs with his laissez-faire tactics that front-loaded world-class attacking talents like Teddy Sheringham. They finished 15th, their worst return since relegation in 1977. When he delivered Jurgen Klinsmann to the club, it was Jerry Francis rescuing Spurs that November and taking them to 3 top-half finishes on the spin. Oh, and in this time, it must be said, the closest Spurs got to lifting silverware was in FA Cup semi-final defeats to Arsenal and Everton in 93 and 95. Meanwhile, the aforementioned talent in Sheringham and Klinsmann, as well as Nick Barmby, would all be ripped away. Meanwhile, Spurs were passing up names like Dennis Bergkamp in favour of players like Chris Armstrong, Ruel Fox, Ramon Vega, and spent nearly £30 million doing so. When Jerry Francis couldn't get talent like Les Ferdinand and David Ginola to work, he was gone. They embodied the famous Keith Birkinshaw quote, "Signs that there was a football club over there could only be found when Spurs sold their soul to an Arsenal legend." Christian Gross hadn't worked as manager, so Alan Sugar snapped up George Graham, famous for the Gunners double in 1971 and Anfield 89. And well, it did work for a while. 21 months later, Alan Sugar waddled off with a boatload of cash. Mere days after a 1-1 draw with Arsenal, with Christmas 2000 right around the corner. Spurs fans got their present early. ENIC were in charge, paying £21.9 million to get themselves 30% of Tottenham Hotspur. ENIC, the type of guys to lay on a buffet for a wedding or a christening from yellow stickered produce from the reduced section down the local petrol station. Of his time at White Hart Lane, Sugar put it better than anyone could when he said, "I put Tottenham into a sound financial position, but as far as performance on the pitch was concerned, we did nothing." By the time ENIC were officially in charge of the club, Spurs had gone on a mesmeric run of form. Mesmeric because of how batshit insane it was. Everton, Southampton, West Ham and Charlton, 360 minutes of Premier League football, not one single goal. It didn't really get much better. George Graham sacked just in time for Glenn Hoddle to return to the club, with his first match back being an FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal.
Tottenham, brilliant save by Seaman, and Everson and Doherty, Tottenham lead! Perez with the free kick, Vieira! To Vieira, only now Wiltor cross goal, Perez bust!
It was the defeat that went some way to confirming Sol Campbell's future. He was to leave the club and to the worst possible team, Arsenal. There he'd win pretty much everything there was to win, and the one thing worth winning that he didn't win, he did as much as he could do to do so, scoring the only goal Arsenal have ever scored in a Champions League final. Meanwhile, despite being placed into the capable, trusting hands of Glenn Hoddle, the optimism never really bore out onto the White Hart Lane turf.
Really hasn't stopped all day. There's a shot. Oh no, it goes to Janssen. No, it's through the legs of Neil Sullivan and it's gone in. It's Ferdinand. It's Ferdinand does well. Has Ziege on the far side of the area if he can find him. Christian Ziege has done it for Tottenham. That's for Blackburn. Ledley King. King needs to clear. And he come with the shot. Oh no!
And when they weren't losing finals in the tertiary cup competition, they were posting back-to-back 50 points and 2 middling finishes before Spurs leaned on another former flame in David Pleat. It was only a run of 5 wins from 6 matches in January and February that pulled Spurs clear of a relegation fight as late as 2004. Spurs were back to just existing again. They had some incredible talent in Jermaine Defoe and Ledley King, but far too much onus was placed on those over the hill, Poyet, Anderton, Ziege and Redknapp, whilst players like Helder Postiga, Sergei Rebrov and Freddie Kanute either flopped or didn't want to stick around for too much longer. The club needed a shot in the arm, and they got one. Daniel Levy had 8 months to find a manager, so the supporters' expectations had been built up and up until an appointment was finally made. And it wasn't even for a first-team manager, it was for a sporting director. Yes, Spurs were going down the modern route, and that meant acquiring a member of the stunning Danish dynamite team, Frank Arnesen, to lead the club into a new age. He was well versed in the job, having spent 10 years at PSV Eindhoven identifying and trading names such as Ronaldo, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Arjen Robben. Arnesen gave Levy the name he wanted as manager, Martin Jol, a man who had been considered a potential assistant manager for Sir Alex Ferguson at Old Trafford. The Spurs owner posited, however, that he couldn't give the supporters Jol, a man who was most recently coach of RKC Waalwijk after they had waited 8 months for Glenn Hoddle's replacement. Of course, Daniel Levy had to go for a big name, and he dug out Jacques Santini out of his back pocket. Santini, a man who had taken Lyon from Ligue 1 no hopers to champions of France, and they were now part of the Champions League furniture. Less said about his coaching of the French national team to a quarter-final defeat to Greece at Euro 2004, the better. Anyway, Arnesen was able to reach a compromise with Levy. Martin Jol would be employed as Santini's assistant, which sounds like a match made in hell. Either way, the squad they would be received was radically overhauled from the prior season. Out were the old guard, with defensive names in Stephen Carr, Gary Doherty and Maurizio Taricco also departing. In their place were fullbacks Noé Pamero and Eric Edmond, before a blend of youth and experience in the middle, Noureddine Nebet from Deportivo La Coruña and Coventry City's Callum Davenport. Meanwhile, the first choice goalkeeper was acquired in Paul Robinson from the ailing Leeds United. And the midfield was improved to the tune of 3 players, West Ham's Michael Carrick, Fulham's Sean Davis and Porto's Pedro Mendes, the latter deal finally signalling the end of Helder Postiga's time at White Hart Lane. What did Spurs get for all this change? An unbeaten start to the season, of course. But not for long. What would quite comfortably be described as a dour football team producing binary results of 1s and 0s, they quickly went under as the nights drew in.
And Van Nistelrooy made no mistake from the spot.
As for the winner against Everton in October.
Good for you, mate.
Minute header ended our unbeaten run on the road. Paul Robinson made excellent saves from JJ Okocha and Stelios Giannakopoulos, but couldn't stop substitute Henrik Pedersen, time Boa Morty providing Andy Cole with a simple header from 8 yards.
But hey, at least they were still in the League Cup.
It's Kanute. Oh, pick that one out. That's 6. Oh, he's made a mess of it. Here's Defoe. 4-2. Shorty now, that's the cup tie. It's well left. Here's Defoe. Goes for goal. Oh, pick that one out. So Michael Brown to give Tottenham the lead on penalties. It's 2-2. So it's cinema upon goal to give Liverpool a place in the semi-final.
Until they weren't. And by that point, everything had changed anyway. By the time London was lit up by Bonfire Night 2004, Jacques Santini had resigned. Ledley King's account told of a French manager without much harnessing of the local language looking embarrassed upon his exit. The marriage between he and Jol never truly worked out, communication probably a problem. Santini failed to give a fair crack to players such as Michael Carrick, who would quickly become more utilised under Jol. Not that things ticked up for Jol in his first few weeks. Unfortunate in their League Cup elimination via a penalty shootout, his Premier League baptism was far from ideal.
November was tough.
And we got our manager the fucking sack.
Like the rivals, Charlton was soon 3-0 up at the Lane.
We lost it by a corner, and Solano, the smallest guy on the pitch, scored. So I knew that we had to change the mental thing, the mentality. It's not only about the quality, but in football it's about mentality.
But there was a flicker of life, most notably in that incredible North London derby lost by 5-4. That promise finally bore out into good results, a great defensive knack, even better moments going forward, with just a pinch of controversy as 2004 became 2005 in happier times for Spurs fans.
December was our most successful month of the season with 4 wins and a draw.
Michael Brown and Spurs lead. Tight decision. Canute going for goal. What a goal! Easy clearance, and it might fall now for Brown. Brilliant effort. Defoe has claimed his hat-trick.
He's eager to swing the ball in left-footed. And Norwich have struggled to get it away.
The tired husk of a team that were closer to relegation than Europe under Santini had become a team ensconced into a European position with half an eye on Champions League qualification. After all, Liverpool were flagging under new manager Rafael Benitez, and heading into 2005, Everton were the team to be shot down from that 4th Champions League spot. Of course, Spurs couldn't quite continue that pace forever, finally undone by league leaders Chelsea, now propped financially up by a Russian oligarch. This spurred on 2 more league defeats amid constant replays in the FA Cup prior to a quarter-final elimination at the hands of Newcastle United up at St James Park. Still, Yol was able to call on backing from above as they handed him attacking firepower in the January transfer window.
To his right. Mido! What a response! It's still Jermaine Defoe! And Mido has got his second!
Alright, nothing would really get much better than that debut for Mido, but Yol had also received the promising Nottingham Forest pair of Andy Reid and Michael Dawson. Armed with a new player in each position, Spurs inconsistently bounced from one week to the next with not a right lot to play for. The end result of 9th and just 3 points off Europe. Such was the promise from the white half of North London, Spurs had to tie up Martin Jol's contract immediately, now that Ajax were sniffing for his signature. The 2005-06 campaign would be the best yet for Spurs in the Premier League.
Defoe. Still it's Defoe! Well, there's no offside, and there's an opening goal here. Defoe has a sight of goal if he can slip Keane in, he has! Back for Genus. Looking for Mido. 1-0 Spurs.
Such was his enthusiasm to take an early throw.
Awkward touch. Here's a chance. Robbie Keane.
Mido might go for Robbie Keane. And it's bundled in by Robbie Keane.
Tottenham Hotspur were in a Champions League spot in January, and not just that, they were 6 points ahead of Arsenal and they'd already gone toe-to-toe with every big team in the land. They were for real. And whilst they weren't mortally wounded by exits in cup competitions, first to Grimsby Town in the League Cup and then to Leicester City in the FA Cup, one thing did hurt. Frank Harnison had been poached by Chelsea. The Blues, not shy to confetti money into the London sky under Roman Abramovich, handed Daniel Levy an £8 million wedge as Arneson signings Timu Tainio and Paul Stalteri were already through the door at White Hart Lane. Arneson's successor, Damien Comolli, a man with just a year's experience at Saint Etienne but no stranger to North London, having worked as a scout under Arsene Wenger at Highbury. Wayne Routledge replaced Simon Davies on the wing and cruelly missed chunks of the season due to injury. However, Spurs were fortunate to be well stocked in that area thanks to the acquisition of Aaron Lennon from Leeds United. But the big news emanating from the summer window was that a certain Edgar Davids was in the building, whilst Lee Young-Pyo and Jermaine Jenas completed the activity. Spurs started off with 2 wins from 2 in the league for the first time since Jurgen Klinsmann was diving at Hillsborough, and they didn't look back from there. 40 points from 21 matches, having slain Manchester City away from home, would normally be construed as title challenging form. Of course, this wasn't a normal season because Chelsea was still under the spell of Jose Mourinho and early Abramovich, and they had dropped just 5 points from their first 21 fixtures. It left an almighty North London struggle on the cards for participation in the Champions League. Early doors, April 22nd was painted as the key fixture, and on their way there wasn't a whole lot stopping Spurs.
Huddleston and Defoe, and Charlton look for a flag, which doesn't come.
Forced to concede the throw, which Mido has taken very quickly. Brilliant bit of skill by Keane. Brilliant! What a goal!
Oh, he's onside here. Jermaine Genius can make real inroads. So he's pulled it across. Surely number 2.
With Robbie Keane. And there it is.
Mido for Tottenham to Keane. Robbie Keane. Fantastic footwork, but the follow-up is tucked in.
He's scored 7 in his last 7 starts. Make that 8 in 8.
That final defeat at home to Manchester United left the derby more tense than it should have been. 4 points the difference, with Arsenal still clutching on to a game in hand. A Spurs win would make the matter all but comprehensive. However, given that the tie took place in between 2 triumphant semi-final legs of the Champions League for Arsenal, there would be the slight chance that Spurs could be robbed of a berth in the competition if the Gunners went on to beat Barcelona in Paris.
Tainio, Robbie Keane for Tottenham, whilst Arsenal were reduced to 10 men. Adebayor's done well against Stelteri. Henry, chance, goal!
As you were in the race for the top 4, the half-hearted appeal of Blackburn wavered as Aaron Lennon's winner took Bolton out of the conversation 8 days later. Meanwhile, Arsenal saw off both Sunderland and Manchester City on their travels to set up an incredible final day. 1 point the difference, Arsenal had the final Highbury occasion in hosting surprise package Wigan Athletic. Spurs had a tough London derby at Upton Park. Nothing was guaranteed.
He totally surprises Paul Robinson. He hits it with terrific power, but into the top corner.
His name will be forever associated with Highbury. And on the last day here, he has a hat-trick.
Spurs just did not look right. In the end, any controversy or conspiracy from this famous story has since been debunked. The tantalising tale of an Arsenal fan spiking lasagna sauce giving way for the reality of norovirus sweeping through the club. Daniel Levy got the police roped in, tried to get the Premier League to postpone the game before finally giving in, as Spurs gave up on the Champions League ghost. In any event, had they refused to play, there was the precedent that Spurs would have been punished regardless. See Middlesbrough's failure to fulfil a fixture in 1996 against Blackburn. They were docked 3 points and it got them relegated. Spurs were so close, so they went big in the market once again. Benoit Asuakoto and Pascal Chumbonda for the fullback positions. Didier Zakora replaced Old Trafford-bound Michael Carrick in midfield, and Dimitar Berbatov was brought in up front. Sadly, no cover in central defence, and it would be sorely lacking throughout the 2006-07 campaign, as Ledley King's knee injuries were keeping him out periodically. Furthermore, he was just one of the famous England players going down to a broken metatarsal in the mid-noughties, missing vast swathes of the season.
Defoe! Oh no! Here's Chimbonda. Oh, Mike Dropacinas! Nice lead there from Lennon. This is Berbatov. Dropping again. Berbatov!
It was his return in the spring of 2007 that catapulted Spurs back to a more respectable 5th place finish, mere placeholder as best of the rest behind Arsenal, yet without putting up the same fight as they had done 12 months prior. A season that had promised a ton but delivered in pinches. Dimitar Berbatov bagged himself 12 goals in the league, and that was apparently enough to cover a place in the Premier League Team of the Year, not to mention envious glances by those with deeper pockets. Spurs, though, appeared in the latter stages of every single cup competition.
Adebayor, Rosicki can finish it here! Oh, it's over the line!
Now Shevchenko. Back onto his favoured left foot.
Oh!
Andre Shevchenko. Corriendo Navas con el centro, vale, saltaba Lawson, se equivocaba, parecía por ahí Karsakov y gol.
But typically, were quickly found out by stronger opponents, 2 of which who went on to win their respective competitions. The one that didn't? Arsenal, of course. Either way, it was another building block, having played 19 more matches with more injuries and less quality on the pitch. And Spurs splashed out once again, ruining their transfer record with the signing of Darren Bent before acquiring both Younes Kaboul and Gareth Bale in defence in a summer that was crying out for a left winger. Nope, Bale wasn't viewed as a winger just yet. Meanwhile, Kevin Prince Boateng wasn't a winger either and was an ill-advised signing for a central midfield department that didn't really need stocking. And despite the investment, the season started disastrously.
Delivery, where will it drop? Chopra! Andy Johnson among those waiting in the middle. It's gone a long way and it's in. Everton are ahead. It's Jolie and Leicester.
Nani, long way out.
Oh! Fabregas joins in. Worth a shot, surely. Oh!
So when Getafe came to town, Martin Jol was sacked at half-time. Yes, with the scores tied 1 apiece, the club simply couldn't wait to get rid of the man that had gotten the closest in a long while to slapping a bit of respect back on Spurs' name. Without much fight, Getafe got the second half winner, and to qualify from a UEFA Cup group stage, Spurs turned to a man who had experience in the competition. Martin Jol was the first man since Keith Birkinshaw to deliver successive European campaigns to Tottenham Hotspur. His replacement, Juande Ramos, on the other hand, was a man who had just delivered successive European trophies to his previous employer Sevilla. Not only that, but he had taken Sevilla into the Champions League. Sevilla, a team with a much smaller budget than Spurs, so imagine what he could do at White Hart Lane. First things first, injecting a spot of positivity into proceedings.
Here's Huddleston, he's through. Does he have the strength to see it through? Here's Huddleston. Defoe! 5-1! And it's Berbatov, he's through again. It's Berbatov! Berbatov makes it 6-4!
From propping up the division, not only had Spurs become more confident, but they had bounced firmly into a safe mid-table spot with a view to a European position come the end of the campaign. Not only that, with a triumph away at Eastlands over Manchester City, only the semi-finals stood between Spurs and a trip to the new Wembley for the very first time. And it just so happened to be Arsenal waiting for them.
Genius goes for goal! It's in the post and it's gone in! Put into the far post! It's an own goal! Keane's through on goal! It's Keane! It's 3-0! It's Keane! Back to Lennon! Is it 4? It is! Genius is in the box, chance for a fifth. It's Melbourne. It's 5-1.
Not only was it Spurs' first win over Arsenal in any competitive form since November 99, but it was Spurs' biggest win over the Gunners since April 1983. It didn't matter that they were a bit preoccupied going out of the FA Cup to Manchester United, only defeating the worst Premier League team in its history and squeaking through to the last 32 of the UEFA Cup between the semi-final and final of the League Cup. Spurs were going to Wembley and they were meeting another nemesis. Tottenham Hotspur had won a trophy for the first time in 9 years. What next? Well, the makeup of the team was changing already. Alan Hutton and Wembley hero Jonathan Woodgate were the fresh faces in that January, with Jermaine Defoe departing for Harry Redknapp's Portsmouth. After limping to 11th place in the league and a harsh last 16 exit in Europe to PSV, the club went big once again. In through the door, Aurelio Gomez, Roman Pavlyuchenko and Verdran Chorluka, and when they weren't being acquired, it was David Bentley, Giovanni Dos Santos, and certainly last but by no means least, a certain Luka Modric. These were exciting times for Tottenham Hotspur.
His hips is Dawson, it looks as if he's going to chip it in, but Giovanni's lurking as well. But it is Giovanni! Oh, what a strike!
And yet they found themselves ripping up and starting again, barely a year into the Juande Ramos experience. Spurs have been wounded by exits like Dimitar Berbatov, Robbie Keane and Paul Robinson, with Sunderland ripping out the depth of the squad with what papers would call a triple swoop for players like Tainio, Chimbonda and Malbranque. Then on the final day, as they panicked and failed to sign Kevin fucking Doyle, Yunus Kabul was sold in what was an all-time mental transfer deadline day. So no wonder they hadn't cobbled together a win by the time Harry Redknapp was earmarked to take on the role of Tottenham Hotspur manager. Redknapp, the type of guy to be a prolific landlord for shit rental properties up and down the country, but not that bothered in raising the rent every year. But enough about his finances. He was Spurs manager, and finally he was the one to make the White Hart Lane faithful dream, and the one that started to make White Hart Lane a distant memory. He got Gareth Bale firing on all cylinders, he got the club into the Champions League 4 years after they should have, and whilst there they embarked on famous nights in Milan again, and Madrid in reaching the quarter-finals. Spurs were there with the ability to turn a top 4 into a big 6, and finally the promise of this new Continental Model had been realised. Yeah, it took a hit when Redknapp was distracted by the prospect of the England job in 2012 and when his succession was completely botched. But even in the undercooked reigns of Andre Villas-Boas and Tim Sherwood, there were some positives to take. The former signed Christian Eriksen, the latter handed a debut to Harry Kane, and the pair kept Spurs in Europe, which was a far cry from what the club had been used to in the 1990s and much of the 2000s. Then of course, Mauricio Pochettino came along in the summer of 2014 and revolutionised the club. But the man that made his tenure at White Hart Lane possible, people like Bill Nicholson. Go check out the stuff we've done on the greatest Spurs manager here.